Today I will tell you how, at my daughter's wedding, I stood in a hall filled with golden light and yet felt completely invisible. The chandeliers sparkled, the jazz band played as if every note were dipped in honey, and laughter circled like champagne bubbles. But none of it reached me. And all the while, in the box pressed carefully against my hands, lay the deed to a $5 million penthouse and a $1 million check. I had once believed this gift could bind us closer. Instead, it became the silent witness to how far apart we had grown. Remember to like and subscribe if you wish to hear more stories in the Grandma Life Stories series, where love, dignity, and truth always find their way forward. The hotel in Boston shimmered like a cathedral of glass and gold. Guests in gowns and tuxedos moved through the lobby as though performing in a play. Every gesture rehearsed, every laugh perfectly timed. Waiters glided by with trays of champagne. The scent of lilies rose from tall centerpieces, and beneath it all the rhythm of jazz gave the evening a heartbeat that never slowed. I stepped into that world in my navy dress. It was not extravagant, but it was the finest thing I owned. I had saved carefully for months, telling myself that if I could not match their grandeur, at least I could stand among them with dignity. My hair was pinned back neatly, my shoes polished to a gentle shine. In my hands was the white box tied with a silver ribbon. No one there knew what it contained. No one suspected it carried the weight of years of sacrifice. Across the hall, my daughter Sophia stood radiant, her gown scattering light like ice beneath a spotlight. She had always longed for perfection, and tonight she had achieved it. Guests surrounded her, their laughter directed at every word she spoke, their eyes drinking in her flawless smile. Beside her stood Nathan, tall, confident, playing the role of a man who had the world in his pocket. His tuxedo was cut to flatter every angle, his hand resting on Sophia's arm with ownership more than tenderness. And there was Clara, my friend of many decades, seated closer to the band. She saw me and her eyes softened, her hand lifting in a discreet wave. It was a small thread of recognition in a hall that had none to spare. I found my table near the edge of the ballroom, away from the shimmering core. As I sat, I placed the gift box gently by my plate and folded my hands in my lap. Around me, the conversations buzzed. They spoke of careers, of homes bought and sold, of luxury vacations and handbags, words that belonged to another world. I nodded when politeness required it, smiled when someone's eyes briefly brushed mine, and returned to silence when their attention moved on. The toasts began. Glasses were raised, cameras flashed, laughter erupted in rehearsed crescendos. I lifted my glass too, the bubbles catching the light, and whispered the words everyone else was shouting. Across the room, Sophia and Nathan glowed. Their joy was undeniable, yet it never once crossed the distance to me. I had come with hope that the gift I carried might be a bridge, hope that my presence might still hold meaning. But sitting in that hall, wrapped in noise yet untouched by its warmth, I realized hope can sometimes feel lonelier than despair. The ribbon on the box gleamed faintly beneath the light, steady and silent. I rested my hand on it, the way one steadies a heartbeat, and tried to breathe in the rhythm of the music. Yet I knew, even in that first hour of celebration, that my story that night would not end as anyone expected. The photographer called for the family pictures. Chairs scraped, glasses clinked, and people shifted toward the dance floor where a white backdrop glittered with gold trim. My heart beat faster. This was the moment I had imagined when I bought the navy dress and saved for the shoes. The moment I thought I might stand beside my daughter, captured in light, proof that I had been part of her joy. Sophia's gown shimmered as she moved to the center. Her smile was dazzling, sharp as glass, and every camera loved her. I stepped forward, smoothing the skirt over my knees, keeping the silver ribbon box steady in my hands. Clara caught my eye across the crowd. She gave a small, encouraging nod. For a heartbeat, hope flickered. Then Sophia leaned close, her hand brushing my arm as if to guide me, her voice so soft no one else could hear. "Mom," she whispered, still smiling wide for the camera. "Step back near the kitchen door. The light works better over there." Her words cut cleaner than any blade. The kitchen door. A place for staff, for trays, for steam and noise, not for a mother who raised her only child. I froze, staring at her flawless smile, the perfect picture she wanted, one without me in it. Before I could answer, Nathan stepped in, adjusting his cufflinks, his laugh polished like glass. "She's right," he said smoothly. "The album has to be flawless. You understand, don't you, Mom? We just want it perfect." The music didn't stop. The guests didn't gasp. They pretended not to hear, their eyes sliding away, glasses lifting higher. The cruelty was staged in silence, masked by violins. Only Clara stood still. Her lips parted, outrage burning in her gaze, but I caught it and shook my head. No defense. Not here, not now. Sophia tilted her chin, her smile fixed, her eyes cold. "Please, Mom," she added, the words soft but heavy. "It's just for the photos. You'll still be in some shots later." A lie wrapped in sugar. She wanted me erased from this moment, edited out of her perfect frame. I heard Nathan chuckle under his breath, the kind of laugh men use when they believe the matter is settled. He squeezed Sophia's hand as if sealing the deal. Around us, relatives shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I felt the air thicken, pressing me toward that kitchen door as though the entire hall agreed. Clara took one step forward, her voice trembling. "Sophia," she began. I raised my hand, a small gesture, but firm. Not now. I felt my body steady, like stone under pressure. My fingers tightened on the silver ribbon of the box. The chandeliers blazed above, but none of their light touched me. The crowd leaned in closer to the happy couple, leaving me on the edges. Sophia turned back to the photographer, tilting her head at just the right angle, radiant, untouchable. Nathan wrapped an arm around her waist, his smile wide, his teeth bright. The cameras clicked. I stepped back just as she asked. Each step echoed on the marble, measured, deliberate. Not toward the kitchen door, not into shadow, but out of their frame entirely. I saw Clara's face, pale with fury, but she did not follow. She knew. This was my choice to make. The box pressed harder into my ribs, its weight more alive now than ever. They thought they had pushed me aside, erased me with a sentence. But in truth, they had just unlocked something I had kept buried, the clarity of where I stood in their world. For years, I had sold comfort to buy opportunity for my daughter. I had pawned Harold's watch so she could register for college. I had worked overtime shifts and walked home in the rain so she could wear new shoes. I had chosen silence, thinking sacrifice would be remembered. But in this moment, under the lights, with my daughter's voice guiding me toward the kitchen door, I understood. Sacrifice had not bought respect. It had bought my erasure. The photographer called for the next group. Laughter rose again, champagne sparkled, and my daughter's smile glittered brighter than diamonds. I stood at the edge, my body calm, my mind sharpening into resolve. The wound cut deep, but the cut was clean. And from that clean edge, I knew exactly what I would do next. I didn't say a single word, not to Sophia, not to Nathan, not to the guests whose eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away, as if politeness demanded they pretend nothing had happened. My silence was sharper than anything I could have spoken. It was the only weapon I had left, and I wielded it with precision. I slid my hand across the table, lifted the white box with its silver ribbon, and pressed it firmly against my chest. My fingers curled into the lid as if I were holding on to something more than paper and ink. I wasn't clutching a gift. I was holding every sacrifice, every late night of work, every meal skipped, every dollar stretched thin so my daughter could shine. That box carried the history of my devotion, and tonight it walked out with me. The ballroom glittered around me, but I refused to shrink. I rose slowly, pushing the chair back until its legs scraped the polished marble. The sound cut through the music, brief but jarring. A few guests paused mid-sip. Others lowered their forks. Clara's eyes widened, her hand frozen around the stem of her wine glass. She looked like she was holding her breath for me. Sophia's voice carried lightly above the hum of conversation, laughing at something Nathan whispered. Her head tilted toward the photographer, her smile glowing, her posture flawless. She never looked my way. To her, I was already erased. I took my first step forward. The air shifted. The hem of my navy dress brushed against the chair leg, and the faint swish of fabric sounded louder than the band's violin. One step, then another. My heel struck the floor, sharp and steady. Tap, tap. A rhythm that felt like defiance. Guests leaned back in their chairs, creating a path without being asked. A waiter holding a tray of champagne glasses froze, his eyes flickering from the box in my arms to my face. He opened his mouth as if to offer help, but my gaze silenced him. This was not a stumble. This was a choice. Clara rose slightly from her chair, her lips parting. "Alina," she whispered, the sound barely audible. I turned my head just enough to meet her eyes. She saw it. The steel, the decision. She sank back into her chair, tears threatening to spill. I walked past the head table. Nathan adjusted his cufflinks, laughing at a joke from a groomsman. Sophia leaned closer to the photographer, perfecting her angle. Neither of them turned their heads. Neither of them cared to notice the woman carrying away the single gift that could have changed their lives. Inside the box was not crystal or linens or a check tucked in a card. Inside was the deed to a penthouse worth $5 million and a check for another $1 million. They had no idea. They had dismissed me without realizing they had dismissed their future. My chest rose with each step, not from pride, but from clarity. The music swelled again, the clinking of glasses returned, but the murmurs followed me like shadows. People knew. They didn't know the contents of the box, but they knew humiliation when they saw it. They knew cruelty disguised as grace. At the far end of the room, the tall double doors waited. The brass handles gleamed under the chandelier light. I pushed them open, and the weight of the hall lifted from my shoulders. Cold air rushed against my skin, cutting through the perfume and heat I left behind. The night outside was honest, unfiltered. Boston streets shimmered with neon signs and the red streaks of passing taillights. I drew in a long breath, my grip on the box steady. Behind me, the ballroom carried on. Laughter, applause, the rhythm of celebration, it all blended into one distant hum. I knew what they would say. They would tell themselves I had felt faint. They would whisper that perhaps I was tired, overwhelmed. They would invent polite excuses for my absence because the truth that a mother had been dismissed at her daughter's wedding was too ugly to share. Clara's face lingered in my mind. She had seen everything. Her silence was not indifference. It was a witness's sorrow. I knew she would call me later. I knew she would tell me she wanted to stand up, to shout across the hall, to drag me back into the photographs. But she also knew what I knew. This was my battle, and walking out was the victory. I stepped down from the curb, raising my arm to hail a cab. Headlights cut through the dark, and a yellow taxi pulled over with a squeal of brakes. I opened the door, slid into the back seat, and set the box carefully on my lap. The driver glanced at me in the mirror, his brow furrowed. "Long night?" he asked. I held his gaze in the glass, my voice low but unwavering. "No. The longest part just ended." He nodded, pulling away from the curb. The hotel lights grew smaller in the window, shrinking into nothing more than a glow on the horizon. My hand smoothed the silver ribbon on the box, feeling its edge under my fingertips. I had walked away from humiliation. I had walked away from erasure. And with that step, I had chosen myself. For the first time in years, I felt my silence speak louder than any words could. I was no longer the invisible mother waiting by the kitchen door. I was the woman who walked out carrying her worth in her own hands. And this was only the beginning. The cab left me on a cracked sidewalk in Dorchester. The neon hum of Boston's luxury hotel district had vanished miles back, replaced by flickering street lamps and trash bins pushed against the curbs. My building stood tired and gray, its brickwork worn, its narrow staircase smelling of dust and boiled cabbage. I balanced the white box on my arm as I climbed, each creak of the steps sounding like a reminder of where I truly belonged. Inside, the air felt heavy with silence. 4 faded walls pressed close around me, painted once but dulled to a lifeless gray. The radiator hissed in complaint, clanging as though it resented its own effort to keep me warm. I set the box on the small kitchen table, its surface scarred with scratches, and lowered myself into the wooden chair by the window. That chair. The only piece of furniture I refused to sell after Mark died. My husband's chair, smooth from his hands resting on its arms night after night. When the loneliness grew unbearable, I sat there and pretended I could still feel the warmth of his palm brushing mine. Tonight, the chair became my anchor again, steadying me while humiliation burned inside me like fire. The contrast seared my mind. Only an hour earlier, I had walked through chandeliers dripping gold, floors polished to mirrors, violins filling the air with flawless notes. And yet, I had returned to this. The peeling paint, the rickety chair, the single bulb buzzing overhead. It was more than a contrast. It was a verdict. I pressed my forehead into my hands. Memories broke loose like water through cracks. The pawn shop smelled of oil and old leather. I could still hear the clink as the jeweler weighed Mark's watch, the only thing of his I had left that held value. $2,000, he said flatly. My stomach nodded, but I forced a smile. That money paid for Sophia's first semester at Boston University. She had called me from her dorm room, giddy with excitement, never knowing I had walked home with empty wrists that night. Another image came. Sophia, 17, twirling in front of a cracked mirror in the secondhand store. A red dress, too expensive, her eyes wide with longing. I had told the shopkeeper, "Hold it for me," while inside my purse sat only enough for bread and milk. For weeks, I skipped breakfast, pretending I wasn't hungry until I saved enough for her to wear that gown to prom. She never noticed the hollowness in my cheeks. She only noticed her own reflection shining. I remembered lining up coins on the counter of the supermarket, the cashier's eyes darting, the people in line sighing impatiently. I had counted out every dime to buy Sophia textbooks, whispering apologies to the man behind me who shifted his weight as though I was stealing his time. Those books helped her graduate with honors, but when I sat in the audience that day, she hugged her friends first, then Nathan. I was just a shadow on the edge of her photographs. The weight of those sacrifices pressed into my chest now. I had carried them all quietly, convincing myself they were seeds of a future where Sophia would look at me with gratitude. But gratitude never came. Instead, she looked at me tonight as if I were a blemish, something to be hidden near the kitchen door. I clenched the arm of Mark's chair until my knuckles whitened. My voice rose in the empty room, sharp against the silence. All of it. For nothing? The question echoed, unanswered. The radiator popped once, then settled. My heart pounded as though it wanted to argue with me, but the truth was undeniable. I reached for the box on the table, my hands trembling. Inside it lay $5 million in property and a $1 million check. I had meant it to be their foundation. I had thought, foolishly, that paper and money could buy respect. Instead, they had asked me to stand by the kitchen door like hired help. I lifted the lid slightly, catching the glint of the deed's embossed seal in the dim light. For a moment, I imagined Sophia's face if she had seen it at the reception. The widening of her eyes, the gasp, the sudden sweetness in her voice. But I slammed the lid shut. That sweetness would have been false. purchased, not earned. My chest heaved. My mind replayed Nathan's voice, smooth and cold. The album has to be flawless, you understand. Yes, I understood. I understood exactly where I stood in their perfect little picture, outside the frame. The anger that burned through me was no longer shame. It was fuel. The humiliation of the ballroom had followed me here, but in this small apartment, it transformed. I wasn't a discarded mother. I was a woman who had choices. I rose from the chair, pacing the narrow room. My footsteps echoed off the bare floorboards. My life had been nothing but giving until I was nearly erased. But tonight I had walked out. That was not weakness. That was the first act of strength. At the window, I looked down at the street. A stray cat slinked along the curb, disappearing into the shadows. Somewhere in the distance, laughter drifted from a bar. I thought of the ballroom again, of Sophia's glowing smile under the lights. My daughter, so obsessed with perfection that she would trade her own mother's dignity for the flawless angle of a photograph. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I pressed my palm against the cool glass. "They wanted me invisible," I whispered, steadying my breath. "But I will not disappear." The words hung in the air, firm as stone. I turned back to the box, still sitting on the table. My decision hardened with every breath. That gift would never belong to them. It would remain with me until I chose otherwise. I sank back into Mark's chair, resting my hands on the worn wood. His absence weighed heavy, but his memory gave me strength. He had worked double shifts, scraped his knuckles raw, sacrificed quietly, just as I had. He would have told me to hold my ground, to remember my worth. For years I had been silent, believing sacrifice was enough. Tonight, that silence broke. The humiliation at the wedding was not the end of me. It was the beginning of a boundary. And as I sat in that cramped apartment, with the city's cold air slipping through the window frame and the deed heavy in its box, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I was done being invisible. The apartment was silent except for the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. I had barely lowered myself into Mark's chair when the phone lit up, buzzing against the chipped table. The name flashing across the screen made my stomach tighten. Sophia. I let it ring twice, 3 times, the sound drilling into the quiet. My hand hovered above the phone. Then I pressed, accept. "Mom," Sophia's voice rushed through, syrupy and sweet. "Why did you leave?" everyone was asking. "You just walked out in the middle of the night." People were so worried her tone was polished, but I could hear the strain beneath it. I could picture her pacing their hotel suite, Nathan close by, both of them calculating. I said nothing at first, only listened to her voice twist into guilt-wrapped persuasion. She cleared her throat, then softened it more. "Tomorrow. Just bring the gift, okay? Everyone wants to see you open it with us. You know how family is. They want to share that moment." My eyes shifted to the white box resting on the table. The ribbon gleamed faintly under the single bulb. They had no idea what it carried. They only knew enough to want it badly. Before I could answer, another voice cut through, smooth and controlled. Nathan. He must have been holding the phone on speaker. "She's right, Mom." "That little box you carried looked important. Everyone was curious. Why keep it to yourself? Bring it tomorrow. Let us all enjoy it together." His words struck like a needle, casual but loaded. Little box. He said it like a joke, but I caught the sharpness behind the smile I couldn't see. He wanted me to hand it over, to parade it in front of the family so he could snatch control. I sat straighter, pressing the phone closer to my ear. My voice came calm, stripped of softness. "No." The line went quiet. I could almost hear Sophia blinking, her perfect composure cracking. "What? What do you mean, no?" she asked. I repeated it, firmer. "No. That gift isn't for yesterday, and it won't be for tomorrow." Nathan's laugh rang out, short and mocking. "Come on, don't be dramatic. You embarrassed Sophia tonight." At least make it right by showing up with the present. It's the least you can do. I felt my jaw lock. The least I can do? I spent 30 years giving more than anyone should. I gave until I was invisible. Tonight was the last of it. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. I could feel them grasping for words, for control. Sophia finally whispered, "Mom, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. We just want you to be part of this." Her plea sounded like concern, but the image of her perfect smile as she pushed me toward the kitchen door burned fresh in my mind. If she wanted me to be part of it, she would have given me space beside her, not shadows behind a service entrance. "No, Sophia," I said evenly. "What you wanted was perfection without me, and now you'll have to live with it." The line crackled. Nathan's voice returned, colder this time. "You'll regret this. One day you'll realize you pushed us away." I let out a breath, steady and deliberate. "No. Tonight I realized you pushed me away years ago. I just finally stopped following. I didn't wait for their response." My thumb pressed the screen, cutting the call off in the middle of their silence. The phone buzzed again instantly. Then again. Message alerts lit up one after another. I set it face down on the table and turned away. For once, their urgency didn't shake me. I walked back to the chair, lowering myself into its wooden arms. My hand brushed the grain where Mark's hands used to rest. The echo of his voice filled my chest. "Hold your ground, Alina. Don't let them take what isn't theirs." I closed my eyes and drew a long breath. That no was more than a refusal. It was the first brick in a wall I should have built long ago. A single word, small but unshakable. The phone kept buzzing. I let it. My answer had been given. The gift was no longer theirs to claim. Morning light crept through the thin curtains of my apartment, sharp and unforgiving. I had barely slept. The echoes of Sophia's voice from the night before still hung in the air like smoke. The phone lay silent now, drained of its urgency, but the white box sat unshaken on the table. Its ribbon gleamed in the pale sun, untouched, untouchable. A knock broke the stillness, firm, familiar. I rose, my bones stiff but my resolve steady, and opened the door. Clara stood there, her hair pinned back hastily, her face pale with concern. She stepped inside without waiting for permission, her eyes scanning the room before they landed on me. "You walked out," she said, almost breathless. "I saw it." "But what happened after? They said you weren't feeling well. Is that true?" I shook my head, gesturing toward the chair by the window. "Sit. There are things you should see." Her gaze drifted to the box on the table. "That's the same one you carried last night." "Yes," my voice carried no hesitation. "And it's the reason I walked away." Clara frowned, settling into the chair. "Alina, you've always been private, but that box? You held it like it was life itself. What's in it?" I pulled the box closer, the cardboard cool under my fingertips. With one swift motion, I slid the ribbon loose and lifted the lid. Paper shifted inside, crisp and heavy. I drew out the top document, its embossed seal catching the sunlight. Clara leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Is that?" "A deed," I said flatly, "to a penthouse in Miami. Market value. $5 million. Her mouth fell open, but I wasn't finished. I reached deeper into the box, pulling out a check encased in a protective sleeve. I held it between two fingers, letting her see the string of zeros written neatly across the paper. $1 million, I said, my voice cutting through the room. Clara gasped, her hand covering her lips. "Alina, why? Why in God's name didn't you ever say anything?" I lowered the papers back into the box, careful but deliberate. Then I looked her in the eye. Because I thought it would buy me gratitude, respect, maybe even love. I thought if I gave them something this big, they would finally see me. Clara shook her head, her voice trembling. And instead, they told me to stand by the kitchen door. The silence after my words was brutal. Clara's shoulders sagged. She pressed her palms against her knees, her voice sharp with anger now. Sophia doesn't deserve a dime of this. And Nathan, he saw the box, didn't he? He's circling like a vulture. That man reeks of desperation. I allowed myself a small nod. He knew. I saw it in his eyes the moment they mentioned the gift. He thinks money makes people bend. He thinks I'll hand it over to protect her happiness. But he's wrong. Clara leaned closer, her voice fierce. Then don't give it to them. Not a penny. Let them learn what it means to bite the hand that carried them. I looked down at the box again, my chest tightening. You don't understand. I almost gave it to them. I was ready to walk into that ballroom, to place it in their hands as a blessing. I believed, naively, that it would change how they saw me. That they would finally say, "Thank you, Mom. We couldn't have done it without you." I swallowed hard, my voice sharpening with each word. But gratitude built on money isn't gratitude. It's a purchase, and I am done buying my own worth. Clara's eyes glistened. So what will you do? I straightened in the chair, my fingers firm on the lid as I closed the box. Keep it. Not for them, not for their hollow smiles or their perfect photographs. This time, I'll decide where it goes, and it won't be wasted on people who see me as a blemish to be hidden. The resolve in my voice startled even me. It felt like a line carved into stone, unmovable, undeniable. Clara let out a long breath, her anger cooling into respect. You always were stronger than you gave yourself credit for. I wish Sophia could see it, but maybe she never will. I stood carrying the box to the narrow shelf where Mark's old photographs rested. I placed it there beside his picture, his face frozen in a smile from years before. For the first time, I felt like he was watching, approving, urging me forward. I turned back to Clara. They thought they erased me last night. But what they don't know is that I erased them from this box. Every document, every dollar, mine to control, not theirs. Clara rose, placing a hand on my arm. Her grip was firm, steady. Then let that be your revenge. Not cruelty, not shouting, just silence and power. Let them wonder what they lost when they pushed you aside. I nodded, the steel inside me hardening further. Yes, they wanted me invisible. But this, I tapped the box. This makes me undeniable. For the first time since the ballroom, my breath came easy. The humiliation still burned, but it had transformed into something stronger. Resolve, clarity. The truth was simple now. I had given my life away piece by piece, and they had thrown me aside. But the moment I closed that box, I knew I would never give them another piece again. The morning after the wedding, while the city still hummed with leftover celebration, Sophia sat stiffly in the hotel suite's lounge chair. She had taken off her wedding gown, but the marks of the straps still pressed into her skin, red lines cutting against her shoulders. The room smelled faintly of champagne and wilting roses. Nathan stood by the window, scrolling his phone, checking messages, his brow furrowed with the weight of creditors he had yet to silence. Sophia's hands twisted in her lap. Finally, she broke the silence. You don't understand, Nathan. You think this is about one night, about one picture. It's not. It's my entire life catching up with me. Nathan lowered the phone, glancing at her reflection in the glass. Then explain. Because from where I stand, your mother embarrassed you in front of everyone by walking out. And if that box is what I think it is, she's holding something we need. Sophia shot him a glare, her eyes flashing. Don't you dare make this sound like it's only about money. I lived years of shame because of her. Do you know what it's like to be laughed at for your mother's patched dress? For shoes with worn soles? To stand in a cafeteria line with friends who ordered whatever they wanted while I prayed no one noticed my lunch ticket was free? Her voice rose, breaking sharp against the hotel's silence. I swore to myself I would never, never let anyone look at me that way again. Not in high school, not in college, not ever. Perfection isn't a luxury to me, Nathan. It's survival. Every flawless picture, every polished moment, it's a shield. If she's in the frame, all of it cracks. Nathan crossed the room, leaning against the table, studying her with cold calculation. So you erased her. You told her to stand by the kitchen door. You made her vanish. Was it worth it? Sophia's jaw tightened, but her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. It was necessary. People see weakness in the smallest things, a frayed dress, a crooked smile, a mother who doesn't fit the image. I've been building this life, this reputation, piece by piece. One wrong photo, one whisper of pity, and it collapses. Nathan smirked, sliding into the chair across from her. Then let her pay for the silence. That's what money is for, Sophia. You said she carried a box. Whatever is inside, it's leverage. If she wants respect, she can buy it back. If she wants to matter, let her pay the price. Sophia turned sharply toward him. You think everything can be bought. You don't get it. Respect isn't bought. It's stolen if you don't protect it. I spent years scrubbing the stain of poverty off my name. If she gives us what's in that box, maybe it balances what she took from me. Maybe then I can breathe. Nathan leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. Listen to yourself. You want her to pay for your pain, but you also want her erased. You can't have both her hands clenched into fists. Yes, I can. If she gives me the gift, I can stand taller. If she stays out of the frame, I can look perfect. That's balance. Nathan chuckled under his breath, a sound more mocking than amused. Perfection is expensive, Sophia. And lucky for you, I know exactly how to collect it. That box, whatever it is, she doesn't deserve to keep it. Not after humiliating you last night. We'll make sure she brings it. We'll make her regret walking out. Sophia's face hardened. She rose from her chair, straightening her silk robe, her voice ablaze now. Then help me. Because I will never, ever go back to being that girl in a patched dress, standing on the edge of someone else's picture. I'd rather burn everything down. First, Nathan's grin widened, his eyes glinting with greed. Good. Then we'll burn her first. With or without her permission, that box will be ours. Sophia looked away out toward the skyline, her reflection staring back at her in the window's glass. She whispered, almost to herself, I can't go back. I won't. And in that single moment, her cruelty was exposed not as random malice, but as a shadow of her own past, an obsession with erasing the poverty she once carried like a scar. The morning air in downtown Boston bit cold against my skin as I pushed open the heavy glass door of Delgado and Associates. The lobby smelled of leather and ink, lined with dark wood panels that whispered of secrets locked behind them. I had been here many times over the years, quietly, never drawing attention, always careful. Today felt different. Today, I was no longer the woman begging for acknowledgement. I was the woman holding power, and I needed to know exactly how to use it. The receptionist looked up, startled, then softened into recognition. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Delgado is expecting you. I nodded, clutching the white box tighter under my arm, and followed her through the hallway. The carpet muffled my steps, but nothing could muffle the storm building inside me. When I entered his office, the man himself rose from behind a mahogany desk. His hair had gone grayer since I first hired him, but his eyes still carried the sharpness of a hawk. Alina, he greeted, extending his hand. I wondered how long it would be before you came back in here. I sat across from him, setting the box down on the desk. They tried to erase me last night. My own daughter, my son-in-law. They looked at me and saw nothing worth keeping in the picture. Delgado studied me carefully. And now you're ready to stop letting them write your story. I slid the lid off the box and pulled out the deed, laying it flat on his desk. The embossed seal gleamed under the lamp. Then I placed the $1 million check beside it. Tell me, Raphael, how much power sits right here in front of us? He leaned forward, pressing a fingertip against the edge of the deed. More than you think. Don't confuse paper with paper. This isn't just property. This is leverage. This is choice. This is protection. I frowned. Protection? Delgado nodded, his tone crisp. Don't underestimate it. Paper is power, Alina. These documents don't only safeguard the value of what you own, they safeguard you. In a world that sees you as expendable, this is the shield they can't ignore. Your daughter and her husband may dismiss you in public, but they cannot dismiss this. And if they think they can, we'll make sure the law reminds them otherwise. I sat back, the words sinking into me like steel. I was ready to give it to them. I thought, maybe it would change how they see me. Maybe they'd finally respect me. His voice cut firm. Respect that has to be purchased isn't respect. It's a transaction, and once the money is gone, so is the pretense. Don't sell yourself for their approval. Use this paper to protect your dignity, not to buy theirs. I traced the edges of the deed with my fingers, remembering how close I had come to handing it over, imagining their false gratitude. So I keep it. More than that, Delgado said, leaning back. You wield it. You decide when and how it is used. You decide who benefits and who doesn't. You're no longer at their mercy. They are at yours. I looked up at him, my voice steadier now. And if they try to come for it? He smiled faintly. Then they'll find that the law is thicker than any wedding vow. You've already placed everything in trust. They cannot touch it without your hand. Unless you sign, their greed dies in the dark. The phrase struck me. Unless you sign. That was the knife edge of it all. I remembered the sound of Nathan's laugh, the coldness in his tone when he told me the album had to be flawless. I remembered Sophia's whisper, pushing me toward the kitchen door. They had wanted me erased, yet all along, the power had rested in my hands. My silence last night had been a wound. Today, it became a weapon. I closed the box again, the ribbon tight under my palm. Then it stays with me. Every paper, every dollar. They'll get nothing. Delgado nodded approvingly. Good. Because the moment you hand it over, you hand over yourself. And Alina Carter doesn't belong at the kitchen door. She belongs at the head of her own table. The words struck deep. I left his office lighter than I had entered, but sharper too. The city roared outside, cars honking, people rushing, but all of it blurred against the sound of my own footsteps. I walked with a new rhythm now, not as the woman dismissed in a ballroom, but as the one holding documents that spoke louder than any insult. Paper is power, and I intended to wield it. Clara came to my apartment 2 days after my meeting with Delgado. She walked in briskly, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on the white box perched on the table. She shut the door behind her, lowered her voice, and said, "Alina, I've been thinking. If you really want to know the truth about Sophia and Nathan, stop listening to what they say. Follow what they do with their money." I frowned. Their money? Clara leaned closer, her tone fierce. People lie with smiles, with words, with promises. But debt never lies. If they've been circling you like vultures, it's because something is rotten underneath. Hire someone, a professional. Let the facts speak louder than their faces. Her words lodged in me like stone. I hesitated, but then nodded. Do it. Find someone you trust. By the next week, a thick manila envelope sat on my table. Clara slid it across with both hands, her lips pressed tight. He's discreet. He's thorough. And he found more than I ever imagined. I opened it slowly, the pages heavy, the ink sharp. Each sheet carried numbers, transactions, signatures, each line carved away at whatever illusion I had left about my daughter and her husband. The first report was a credit card statement. Multiple cards, all maxed out, balances bleeding into late fees. Thousands spent at high-end boutiques, jewelry stores, restaurants that charged more for a bottle of wine than I used to pay for rent. My chest tightened as I flipped the page. Loans, a car loan for a luxury SUV, monthly payments barely met, interest climbing. Another loan for furniture from a designer store, more than most people spent on a year's wages. Then the honeymoon, a trip to Santorini, splashed across Instagram with staged perfection, smiles on beaches, sunsets behind champagne glasses. The report spelled the truth, the entire trip financed on credit. Every image of paradise was a debt waiting to be collected. I clenched the paper so hard it wrinkled. They were drowning while the world thought they were flying. Clara crossed her arms, her jaw set, and they were hoping you'd be the lifeboat. The next file was worse. It wasn't just debt, it was intent. Notes from a legal consultation, highlighted and stamped. The words made my blood run cold. Power of attorney. Nathan had met with a lawyer 3 months before the wedding. He had inquired about the process of securing guardianship over an aging parent's assets, about what constituted incapacity, about how to streamline access to accounts. He had asked if a signature under pressure could hold up in court. My throat burned as I read. Sophia's name appeared too, listed as a joint petitioner, my daughter, my only child, planning how to take control of my life on paper while asking me to smile for photographs in public. I slammed the folder shut, my breath harsh. They weren't just careless. They were planning. Clara's voice was steady, but I saw the rage in her eyes. Yes, they wanted to strip you clean, Alina, not with open theft, but with documents. They wanted to make you sign away your life while smiling for the camera. That box you hold, it's the only thing that hasn't slipped through their fingers yet. I stood pacing the narrow room, the weight of it crushing me and hardening me all at once. So all along, the laughter, the smiles, the whispers at the wedding, it wasn't only cruelty, it was strategy. They humiliated me while planning to rob me blind. Clara nodded. Now you see the truth. They aren't just ungrateful, they are dangerous, and they will not stop. I stopped pacing, my fists clenched. Then neither will I. The silence that followed wasn't weak. It was sharp, vibrating with decision. Every humiliation I had endured had been cruel. But this revelation was war. They thought paper would trap me. They didn't know I already understood the truth. Paper could free me. I gathered the documents back into the envelope, my movements swift. They won't touch another page of my life. Not my money, not my trust, not me. Clara's voice softened, but her words struck with precision. Then fight. Them where they live. Not in smiles, not in photos, on paper, with facts. Make their lies collapse under the weight of their own debts. I looked down at the envelope, then at the white box holding the deed and the check. In that moment, everything connected. Their desperation, their cruelty, their silence when I walked away. They hadn't dismissed me because I was worthless. They had dismissed me because they believed I was already theirs to control. The truth hit like fire. They had miscalculated. I turned back to Clara, my voice steel. They wanted me invisible. But now I see everything, and I will make sure they regret underestimating me. The weight of the envelope pressed into my hand, heavier than any weapon. Debt was their weakness. Paper was my shield. And for the first time, I understood. The battle had already begun. The phone rang just after midnight. Its shrill tone tore through the stillness of my apartment, and my chest tightened as soon as I saw the name flashing across the screen. Sophia. I answered, and what came through wasn't her usual polished tone, but a frantic cry. "Mom, please." Nathan collapsed. "He's at Massachusetts General. They rushed him to the ER. The doctor says they need someone to sign papers right away." Her voice broke into sobs, loud, messy, desperate. For a moment, my stomach dropped, instinct tugging at me to grab my coat, to rush into the night. But something in her delivery caught me off guard. It was too sharp, too controlled beneath the trembling. A performance. Still, I forced my voice steady. Which doctor? Who admitted him? Give me the name. There was a pause, almost imperceptible. Then Sophia stammered, Doctor. Reynolds Cardiac Unit. They said, Mom, please, they said without a signature, they can't treat him. I didn't respond. Instead, I hung up and immediately dialed the hospital myself. The line connected quickly. Massachusetts General Hospital. How may I direct your call? This is Alina Carter, I said firmly. My son-in-law, Nathan Walker, was admitted to the emergency room tonight. Cardiac unit. Can you confirm his condition? The receptionist checked. Keys clattered faintly through the receiver. Then came the answer that hardened every muscle in my body. I'm sorry, ma'am. We have no patient by that name. I gripped the phone tighter. Check again. Nathan Walker, 31 years old, admitted tonight, supposedly unconscious. Another pause. The voice returned, calm but definitive. Ma'am, there is no record of a patient by that name in our ER or cardiac unit. None at all, I ended the call, my hands shaking, not from panic, but from rage. The truth crystallized instantly. Sophia had lied. The frantic sobs, the desperate plea, the invented doctor's name, it was all theater. A trap designed to pull me from this apartment, to corner me into bringing the box with me, to force my hand into signing something under duress. The phone rang. Again. I let it. Then again. And again. Finally, I answered, my voice ice. Mom, where are you? Sophia's tone was sharper now, less grief, more urgency. Nathan needs this. They're waiting for you. No, I said flatly. Nathan isn't at the hospital. I just called. There's no patient by that name. Silence. For the first time, Sophia faltered. I could hear her breathing, quick, uneven. Then Nathan's voice slid in from the background, smooth but strained. She called? Damn it, Sophia, I almost smiled. The mask had cracked. You staged it, I continued, my voice rising. You lied to my face to drag me out of my home. You thought fear would break me, but it only broke you. Sophia's tone turned sharp, her desperation shedding its disguise. Mom, stop being so difficult. Just bring the box. Why are you making this harder? We're your family. You owe us this. My heart slammed once against my ribs, but I didn't waver. No, what I owe you is the truth. You humiliated me, tried to erase me, and now you've proven you're willing to stage emergencies to steal from me. You've crossed a line you can't uncross. Nathan's voice returned, angrier this time. If you won't help willingly, then maybe you shouldn't be trusted with that box at all. You're too old, too stubborn. Someone has to manage it for you. The implication was clear. Power of attorney, the very scheme Delgado had warned me about. My reply cut clean. If you ever try that, you'll find the law waiting for you. And the law is on my side, not yours. I ended the call before they could respond. My hand trembled, but my spine stayed straight. I looked at the white box on the table, its silver ribbon gleaming faintly in the lamplight. They thought they could lure me with lies, trap me with fear, make me sign away everything under the weight of a false emergency. Instead, they had exposed themselves completely. The quiet of the apartment settled around me again, but this time it didn't feel suffocating. It felt electric. The battle lines were drawn. They weren't just greedy. They were predators. And they had just revealed their teeth. I touched the lid of the box. Steady now. Paper is power, Delgado had said. Tonight I saw it clearer than ever. They couldn't win with truth. They had already chosen deceit, and I would meet them head on, not as their victim, but as their reckoning. The phone rang again the following evening. I stared at it on the table, the screen glowing Nathan's name, my pulse steady as stone. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice slid through, smooth but laced with iron. "Alina, let's stop the games. Bring the box. If you do, you'll have your place in the family album. You'll be in the pictures. You'll be remembered the way you want to be." I gripped the phone tighter, my jaw set. My reply cut clean through his words. "I am not a prop for your photographs. I am not a backdrop for your performance. I am a person." For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then his laugh came, short and biting. "You're being ridiculous. Nobody wants to cut you out. We just need you to cooperate. Why make this so hard?" I let my breath out slowly, sharp and deliberate. Hard? What's hard is watching my daughter sell her dignity for appearances. What's hard is knowing you tried to trick me into signing my life away with lies about hospitals and doctors. You've mistaken my silence for weakness. That mistake ends tonight. Nathan's voice rose, no longer silky but raw. "You think you can hold this over us? You think you can walk away while your own daughter suffers? That box is the difference between a future and ruin for us. If you care about her at all, you'll hand it over." My chest tightened, but not with guilt, with fire. If Sophia suffers, it is because of the choices she made. Choices you encouraged. Debt, lies, greed. Don't you dare place that weight on my shoulders. I carried her through life already. My arms are done carrying. In the background, I heard Sophia's voice sharp, cracking under pressure. "Mom, please. Stop being so cruel. You don't understand. Without that gift, we'll lose everything." I closed my eyes for 1 second, and I saw her as a child again. Her shoes too small, her cheeks red with embarrassment when the other girls laughed at her dress, patched at the seams. But the image shifted into the woman at her wedding, radiant, ruthless, telling me to stand by the kitchen door. My voice hardened. "You lost me first. You lost me when you decided my presence was shameful. You lost me when you valued the camera more than your mother." Nathan snapped, his anger spilling over. "You can't keep it forever. Sooner or later, you'll sign. One way or another, you'll hand it over." I let the silence hang, letting him hear the calm in my breath. Then I answered, my tone cold as steel. "No, Nathan. One way or another, you'll learn that I am not yours to control. Not my money, not my paper, not me." Sophia sobbed in the background, a sound torn between desperation and fury. But I did not soften. I had been soft my entire life, bending, giving, sacrificing until nothing was left. Now the edges were sharp. Now I was unyielding. I ended the call with a single motion, my thumb pressing the screen, the silence returning with finality. The phone buzzed again within seconds, but I left it ringing. Their desperation no longer had power over me. I walked to the table and set my hand firmly on the box. The deed, the check, the proof that paper carried more strength than their hollow threats. Delgado had been right. Paper was power. And tonight I had shown them it was mine alone to wield. I whispered into the empty room, the words low but lethal. "You wanted me invisible. But now you will see me in every shadow you fear." For the first time in years, I felt no tremor in my spine, no doubt in my chest. The confrontation had come and gone. I had spoken, and my voice had cut deeper than any silence ever could. This was no longer about humiliation. It was war, and I had just fired the first shot. The taxi pulled up to the towering glass building overlooking the harbor. Sunlight bounced off the windows, each pane catching the ocean's blue and turning it into a wall of fire and sky. I stepped out, the white box tucked under my arm, and the doorman immediately straightened. His uniform was pressed to perfection, but his smile carried something warmer, recognition, respect. "Welcome home, Miss Carter," the concierge said as I entered the marble lobby. His words struck deeper than he realized. Welcome home. Not step aside, not wait over there by the kitchen door. 2 words wrapped in dignity I had not felt in years. I nodded, my voice calm but strong. "Thank you." The elevator rose swiftly, the floor numbers blinking in polished brass. With each level, the weight of humiliation fell further behind me. By the time the doors opened on the top floor, my chest felt lighter, my spine taller. The penthouse greeted me with walls of glass that opened onto the endless ocean. The waves shimmered under the afternoon sun, stretching farther than my eyes could see. Light flooded every corner of the vast room, warm, honest, impossible to hide in. I stepped forward, my heels clicking on the gleaming wood, the sound sharp, victorious. I carried the box into the living room and set it gently on the table. Then I turned to the movers trailing behind me. Among the new furniture, there was only one item I insisted on bringing from Dorchester. They carried it carefully, a small wooden chair worn smooth with age, Mark's chair. "Place it by the window," I directed. They obeyed, and when they left, I pulled the chair closer to the glass. I lowered myself into it, the wood familiar beneath my hands, the ocean stretching before me. The contrast struck me like thunder. Once I had been told to stand near a kitchen door, hidden from the camera, erased from the frame. Now I sat in front of floor-to-ceiling glass, my reflection strong against the sea, impossible to ignore. The chair creaked, a sound that carried memory. I rested my hand on the armrest, imagining Mark sitting here, grinning at the view. "You'd have liked this," I whispered. "You'd have told me it was about time I stopped giving everything away." I rose, walking slowly across the wide living room, each step echoing in the vast space. The penthouse was more than luxury. It was proof that silence had not been surrender. Proof that I had carried power all along, even when my daughter's voice tried to reduce me to nothing. The phone buzzed in my bag, but I didn't look. I already knew who it was. Sophia or Nathan, their desperation spilling over into voicemail after voicemail. The difference was clear now. Before, their voices used to unsettle me. Tonight, they barely brushed against me like wind against glass. I stood at the window, pressing my palm flat against the cool surface. Below, the city churned, cars streaming, people moving fast, chasing something they couldn't name. Out here, above it all, I felt no rush. My life had slowed into clarity. Every humiliation, every sacrifice, every insult whispered at the edge of a ballroom had brought me here. And now, from the top of this tower, I saw the truth. They hadn't pushed me into invisibility. They had pushed me into awakening. The reflection staring back at me in the glass was no longer the mother hoping to be noticed. It was a woman claiming her ground, her view, her power. The box sat safely behind me, its ribbon still tied. But I knew the real gift wasn't inside it anymore. The real gift was this. I no longer needed their approval, their staged smiles, their empty words. I whispered into the vast room, steady and sharp. From the kitchen door to the penthouse glass. That is the story you'll never erase. For the first time in decades, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like victory. The first weekend in the penthouse, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Clara stood there with her arms full of grocery bags, her cheeks flushed from the climb. Behind her were two of her old neighbors from Dorchester, women I'd known for years, but hadn't seen since the wedding chaos. They carried covered dishes, wine bottles, laughter that spilled into the hallway before they even crossed the threshold. "We thought you might be hungry," Clara said, brushing past me without waiting for permission. "And this palace of yours needs to smell like garlic and rosemary, not just polished wood and glass." For a second, I just stood there, startled. Then I smiled, really smiled, something I hadn't done in weeks. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Make yourselves at home." Within minutes, the penthouse transformed. Pots clanged in the kitchen, the oven warmed the air, and the scent of herbs and roasted chicken filled the wide, gleaming rooms. The women moved easily, like they had cooked together their whole lives. Clara chopped onions at the counter while another kneaded dough for fresh bread. Someone opened a bottle of wine, the cork popping sharp against the hum of conversation. I set Mark's old wooden chair at the head of the dining table. It didn't match the sleek glass and chrome, but it didn't need to. It was mine, and tonight it anchored me in a room finally alive with warmth. As the table filled with dishes, steaming vegetables, crisp salad, bread fresh from the oven, I felt something shift. It wasn't luxury that filled the space. It was presence. It was belonging. We sat, plates piled high, glasses lifted in a casual toast. Laughter spilled as naturally as wine, stories weaving across the table. One woman teased Clara for burning the onions. Clara shot back with a grin. At least I didn't mistake salt for sugar like you did last Christmas. The whole table roared, and for a moment the sound drowned out every memory of Sophia's cold wedding hall. I found myself laughing too, not forced, not polite, but from somewhere deep. My shoulders loosened, my chest felt lighter. I reached for another piece of bread, and Clara leaned across the table, her eyes warm. "See, Alina?" she said softly. "Family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who shows up with food when you need it, who makes sure your table isn't empty." The words hit me with quiet force. I nodded, my throat tight. "You're right," I whispered. "Last week I thought I had no family left. Tonight I see I was wrong." One of the neighbors raised her glass again. "To chosen family," she declared. We all clinked glasses. The sound rang clear, sharp, more powerful than any toast at the wedding had been. As the night went on, the view outside the glass walls faded from ocean blue to black, city lights twinkling like distant stars. Inside, the table glowed with candlelight, faces lit with joy, conversation alive and unrestrained. I looked around, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Between bites, Clara reached for my hand under the table. Her grip was firm, her eyes steady. "You don't need their approval anymore, Alina. You've built something stronger. This," she gestured to the table, to the laughter, "this is the family that matters." I squeezed her hand back, my chest filling with a warmth no penthouse or deed could buy. The truth settled into me like stone. I was not alone. I had thought losing Sophia's respect meant losing everything, but that night, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I gave, I realized I had gained more than I lost. The sound of Sophia's dismissive whisper, "Stand by the kitchen door," still echoed in my memory. But now, as I looked at the glass doors opening onto the ocean with my friends gathered close, I knew I had stepped through a different door, one that led to strength, belonging, and peace. Chosen family. It wasn't what I expected, but it was exactly what I needed. The morning after the dinner with Clara and the others, I sat by the glass wall of the penthouse, Mark's wooden chair beneath me, the ocean stretching endlessly in front. The white box rested on the table, its ribbon still tied, its weight still heavy. But it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a tool waiting to be used. I thought of Sophia's voice on the phone, frantic with lies. I thought of Nathan's threats, smooth and venomous. For weeks I had replayed their cruelty, their betrayal, their desperate schemes. At first it had been humiliation, then anger. But now, as the waves rolled in steady rhythm, something different took root. Resolve, I picked up the deed, the embossed seal shining against the sunlight. In it, I saw more than property. I saw a possibility. What if this wealth wasn't meant to be handed over to greedy hands or hoarded in silence? What if it could be transformed into something greater, something that would outlive both Sophia's cruelty and Nathan's ambition? That thought followed me into Delgado's office the next afternoon. He studied me carefully as I laid out the papers in front of him. "Raphael," I said, my voice firm, "I want to create something lasting. Not for them. For women like me. For women who gave everything to their families and were left with nothing." His brow lifted. "You're serious?" more serious than I've ever been. I want to establish a foundation. Call it the Silver Ribbon Foundation, a place where women, mothers, widows, grandmothers can find legal help, financial guidance, and the strength to stand on their own. I don't want revenge. I want transformation. For the first time, Delgado smiled. Not the polite kind, but something warmer, genuine. Paper is power, he said again, but softer this time, and you've just decided to wield it differently than they ever expected. The process began immediately. Lawyers drafted the documents, banks opened the accounts, and the name Silver Ribbon Foundation took shape on letterhead and seals. Each step gave me a sense of clarity I hadn't known I was missing. Every signature I put down wasn't surrender, it was creation. Weeks later, we held the first small gathering in the Penthouse. Not a gala, not a staged event with cameras and champagne, just a circle of women who carried stories like mine. One had been pressured to sign her retirement away for her son's business. Another had sold her home to pay her daughter's debts. All of them had been made invisible by the very people they loved most. As they spoke, their voices shook, but their eyes burned. They weren't weak. They were wounded, and now they were ready to heal. I stood at the window, looking at them reflected in the glass behind me, and spoke with a strength I hadn't felt even in the courtroom of my own life. I know what it is to be erased. I know what it is to give until nothing is left. But tonight, I want you to remember one thing. Your worth is not measured by what you give away. It is measured by what you choose to protect. This foundation exists, so no one else has to stand alone at the kitchen door. The room filled with applause, not polite, but fierce, raw, alive. Clara stood near the back, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands clapping the hardest. In that moment, I felt something unexpected. Not bitterness, not triumph, freedom. My pain had not gone to waste. It had been refashioned into a weapon and a shield, not for me alone, but for every woman who needed it. The irony was sharp, but satisfying. Sophia and Nathan thought they could force me into silence, into surrender. Instead, their cruelty had birthed a legacy far greater than their carefully curated wedding photos. They had tried to use me as a prop. I had turned myself into a pillar. That night, as the women left with new resolve in their steps, I returned to Mark's chair by the window. The ocean was dark now, the waves restless under the moonlight. I rested my hand on the wooden armrest, whispering into the quiet. We did it, Mark. We turned every sacrifice into something that will outlive even memory. The box sat behind me, lighter now, its contents no longer secrets or weapons, but seeds planted in fertile ground. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that what I had built would echo long after Sophia's obsession with perfection faded. I had not chosen revenge. I had chosen power with purpose, and that choice made me untouchable. The pounding came early, sharp against the glass entry of the penthouse. I rose from Mark's chair, the ocean still silver blue with morning light, and walked toward the sound. Through the glass, I saw them. Sophia and Nathan, faces pale, eyes frantic. Sophia pressed her palm flat to the glass. Mom, please. We shouldn't have said those things. We were under pressure. We didn't mean it. Nathan's voice cut in, low but urgent. This isn't about the past anymore. We need your help. One signature, one chance, and we can start over. Let's not destroy this family. For years, those words, family, start over, one chance, would have pulled me open. For years, I bent. I gave. I sacrificed at the sound of them. But now, as the light spread across the room, I felt none of that weakness. I opened the inner door just enough so my voice could pass through. When you come here without an agenda, I said, my tone sharp as glass. When you come here not to take, not to scheme, but to stand as people, not props, then you can knock. Until then, this door stays closed. Sophia's lip trembled, tears streaking her makeup. "Mom, don't do this." "We're your blood." I shook my head slowly, my voice firm. "Blood gave you life. But character decides if you deserve a place in mine." Nathan's jaw tightened, frustration flashing, but he said nothing. He knew there was no more leverage left. Their lies, their debts, their games had all been exposed. The box behind me, the papers inside, were untouchable now. I closed the glass door, their voices muffled into silence. They remained shadows on the outside, pounding, fading into nothing. I turned my back to them, walking toward the light-filled room. Mark's wooden chair waited by the window. I sat, the ocean stretching endlessly before me, sunlight breaking across the horizon and washing my face in warmth. My hands rested steady on the chair's arms. My heart was calm, no longer heavy with humiliation, no longer burning with anger, calm, strong, unshaken. And then, in the quiet, the truth of my story filled the air. At my daughter's wedding, they made me invisible. I smiled, I walked away, and I chose myself. Everything changed. The camera of my memory shifted outward. The penthouse doors closed firmly, but inside, the light poured through glass, spilling across wood, across paper, across my face. The world outside could pound, could beg, could rage. But in here, there was peace. The final door had closed, and with it, a new life had begun.